The Glens of Antrim. The Antrim Plateau is the most northeasterly corner of Ireland with the nearest land point to Scotland. It was from the village of Cushendall, Travanbrack townland, Lade parish, that our ancestor James McClarty departed for Canada. The coastal strip of County Antrim is a mass of the most beautiful glens, valleys, and mountains. The rivers in the glens tend to plunge into waterfalls, and the valley floors have become a patchwork quilt of tilled fields. Leaving the cemeteries, Arlene drove us through the countryside surrounding Cushendale. As I sit here trying to gather my thoughts and sort through photos, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. We saw so much, and to think that where we walked, they could have walked, and seen their surroundings very different from how we are seeing them today. I found a lot of information about Daniel McClarty's ancestor through a book Ethel Cliff Phillips wrote entitled A Family History in 1989 in honor of her ancestor James McClarty, who was a son of our great-great-uncle Daniel. He immigrated to the States, went to Owen Sounds, met and married his wife, and returned to the States, settling in Iowa. I have a DNA match with Michael Clift on Ancestry, along with 6 other descendants of James, son of Daniel. In the book, she included this ballad saying it is about the region from whence James McClarty immigrated, which nostalgically speaks of returning to my own Cushendall.
Far across yonder blue lies a true fairyland, with the sea rippling over the shingle and sand, where the gay honeysuckle is luring the bee, and the green glens of Antrim are calling to me. Sure, if only you knew how the light of the moon turns a blue Irish bay to a silver lagoon, you'd imagine the picture of heaven it would be, where the green glens of Antrim are welcoming me. Soon I hope to return to my own Cushendall. It's the one place I know that can outshine them all. Sure, I know every stone, I recall every tree, where the green glens of Antrim are heaven to me. Sure, I'd be where the people are simple and kind, and amongst them there's one that's been in my mind. Oh, I pray that the world would in peace let me be, where the green glens of Antrim are calling to me, where the green glens of Antrim are calling to me.
Glendon Viaduct is known as a big bridge by the Glens people. It spans River Dun in the center of the glen and is reputed to be one of the finest buildings of its kind in the British Isles. They were 5 years building it, from 1834 to 1839, though no work was done during the winter months. One of the master builders, Mr. Bowles, came from County Monaghan, and the others came from Donegal. They were lodged where Mackay's public house is, and also in Durgan, built in 1828. The stones were quarried in Laird, taken by boat to Cushendall, and then transported by cart to the bridge. The arches were filled with grout, run in as slurry, and the range wall was drilled and filled with lead. The river was paved by McClarty of Laird, a masterwork of its own. Local labour was employed. John Kane from Kerry did a turn of the sheep for Mr. Casement each morning and came to work at the bridge after that. A man travelled from Skerry who carried a black box, yet he was never seen to open it. The labourer's pay was 10 pence a day. Barrowmen, and they were very numerous, and cartmen were paid a shilling a day. We drove through the rolling countryside to Cushendall and on through Glenanne. Arlene took us to see the Glendon viaduct that was built in the time frame of the early 1830s, and the local McClarty menfolk were apparently employed in its construction. A Glens of Aitrim family has established a walking route in memory of a young farmer who died suddenly. Ronan Macaulay helped his father on their farm in Glendon, County Antrim, until his death in 2016, aged 38. He died of sudden adult death syndrome, a cardiac condition. Before his death, Ronan and his father John had been developing a network of farm tracks to improve access to their steep-sided land. When we were doing this, my son Ronan thought wouldn't it be a great idea if local people could come and walk on it and enjoy the scenery, said John. The family decided to develop the trail network in his memory and call it Ronan's Way. Ronan was married and the father of a young daughter, Natalie. His wife, Paula, said the trail had helped her after his death. Nobody really got to explore Glendon. It was kind of the Glen that got left behind, she said. Ronan's thing was always about people going out and enjoying the land that he called home. The walk to me is quiet, it's peace, and you can gather your thoughts, and to me that's Ronan, she added. We returned to Cushendall, dropping off the keys to the church warden, who is the area coal supplier. The picture to the right is Red Bay Harbour with Glen Eyre Waterfoot Village and beach stretching across the middle of the photo. To the left is Red Bay Pier. Notice the coal on the bank. It has been shipped to and sold from here for centuries. Glen Eyre Forest. We continued on to a lovely little tea house at the falls for lunch, where Arlene again insisted on paying for lunch. The day was on her, she said. Carol told her that our plan was to buy her breakfast and lunch for being so kind to ferry us around. Arlene said she works for God and he had different plans, so what could we say but thanks? The Lyric Lodge restaurant. They had just finished redecorating it and had removed all the old farm instruments and other Irish artifacts which hung from the ceilings and decorated the walls. Our waitress was Canadian. She's from Manitoba and met a man from Cushendall, married and moved here. She's a brother in St. Albert where Carol and I raised our boys. Small world.
managed to get married yet. So I'm going to take this back and say, okay, you guys, this is where you can come and get married.
Arriving back to Cushendall, Arlene drove us down to the beach in town, dropped us off in the center of town, and rushed back to her church to prepare for an evening service. Arlene Moore, there aren't words enough to express our thanks and appreciation to you for your kindness and hospitality. We hope someday you can come to Canada and we can reciprocate. Turnling's Tower, Cushendall, a truly remarkable romantic building, providing at once the pivot and focus for the central crossing of the town, and built by Francis Turney, the East India Company nabob of Drumnassau and Richmond Lodge, Hollywood. Though eccentric and perhaps demented, he erected extraordinary improvements in the buildings and roads on his property. The tower was a great object of Mr. Turnley's thoughts. Among his papers were instructions given to Dan McBride, an army pensioner whom he appointed its guard. It was always to be provisioned for a year. It was to have a permanent garrison of one man who was not to leave it day or night. It was to be armed with one musket, a bayonet, a case of pistols, and a pike 13 feet long, having a cross of wood or iron on its handle, so that it could not be pulled through the hole guarding the doorways. It was erected as a place of confinement for idlers and rioters. When this Hibernian ornamental hermit retired, he was replaced in due course by a Mr. Stewart, who was in the Navy in the First World War and had a wooden leg. Despite which he was an enthusiastic tree climber, he brought up a large family in the tower, rang the curfew bell religiously. The tower is 20 feet high, tapered, and rises 4 stories to a height of 40 feet, topped by modest battlements. On each of its 4 faces are projecting windows with a myrtle hole in the base of the lowest. It is built of rich red sandstone rubble, one wall being slate-hung. In the base of the east wall is inset a modest fountain capped by Mr. Turnley's initials. The doorway is narrow and round-headed. The door itself is most medieval, sheathed in iron with knobs on it. Boyle in 1835 wrote, "It is not at all ornamental in its structure and is said to have been built after the model of some Chinese tower. To a modern eye, it appears entirely romantic and Western European." We walked back to the B&B to our lovely room for the evening, had a wonderful chat with our host, Mr. O'Neill, who told us he had customers a few weeks ago from Montana who were searching for their Murphy ancestors. Who knows, maybe they were descendants of Mary and John Murphy, daughter of Daniel McClarty, brother of our great-great-grandfather James. Tomorrow, Elvin Sutter, a volunteer with Ireland Reaching Out, who did hours of research for me to find Daniel's farm and provided information about the townland our James left from, will pick us up and take us to see the McClarty lands, including those of our South African cousins. We can hardly wait. Carol, we had an awesome day, and now Judy is getting our day's stories and photos prepared. It is truly a labor of love for our family in Canada, especially Barry, Lorna, and Jason, as they've been instrumental in helping Judy with her research. She has recorded videos and just smiles to herself as she can hardly wait to share them with Barry and Lorna. She wants to be sure they hear the waterfalls and all the local noises. Today was churches, prayers, graves, and sightseeing. Tomorrow we visit family heritage sites and farms. Barry and Lorna's response. Thank you, Judy and Carol. We have used Street View on Google Earth and rode up and down the roads and streets in Northern Ireland. It is a most beautiful country. The pictures you post seem so familiar. We feel that we have almost been there. This is a true adventure for all of us. Keep up the good work. Jason. Thanks, Judy and Carol. I appreciate the acknowledgement and give the same back to you. I hope today's journey leads to another clue, a record, a revelation. Prior to our departure for Ireland, Arlene forwarded me this map indicating the location of all the farm sites we would be visiting with Elwyn. The blue shaded area is Tavnahary, where Daniel's farm is located. The roughly blue circled area is Tavnabrack, the area James left from. She says, note the loop road off the main road, which is Tavnahagan Lane, and the rough area indicated by black circling is Laird, the area where the 86-87 farmhouses are South African ancestors and Arlene's ancestors are across from each other. April 14th, McClarty's of Laird Road. Our day started off with Elwyn Sutter, a volunteer from Ireland, reaching out, picking us up at our B&B. It was great to finally meet him after corresponding with him through that website over the past 2 years. Our first stop was 86 Laird Road, the farmer home of Alec McClarty, uncle to the South African McClartys. The original farmhouse is still standing, and the cottage Alec lived in is currently going through renovations. Next door at 84 Laird Road is a large older home that has obviously been added to and extensively renovated over the years. Across the road closer to the sea is 85 and 87 Laird Road. Arlene Moore's ancestor John McClarty owned 84 or 87, not sure which, and his daughter Jane and her husband Duncan Humphreys took over the property. Arlene Moore does not know the name of John's parents, but being the house is in the vicinity of the South African ancestors' home, there must be some connection.
If you look on the 1911-1901 census, you can see how many outbuildings there are. Don't know if you've done that. If you look on the, you've got the basic census, and then you click further down, it says outbuildings. So it'll sort of say, you know, 1 barn, 2 pig houses, a chicken shed, or that sort of thing. That gives you a bit of a flavour of what it's like. But that's sort of Red Bay there. Then you're looking south towards Belfast and the Isle of Man. Scotland's just over there, but we can't see it today.
We're pretty sure that this Arlene who showed us yesterday was So you're saying 87 would have been down this way?
Well, somewhere, it might be that house there.
Yeah.
The house just in there.
Yeah. We'll walk back and take a look down.
Yeah, let's go down. Yeah, you can see.
This is coming straight down.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
So it would be straight down here.
Yeah.
Judy?
James McClarty of Tavnbrack. Our next stop was to see the townland where our great-great-grandparents lived before immigrating to Canada in 1841. We don't know exactly where his farm would have been, and we could only look through a fence up to the hill to where it would have been. The property directly through the fence had a new house but did have an older-looking shed on it. The pot-filled lane called Tavenaugh Lane leads up the hill to the townlands. So Carol, he was saying that the land straight up here. Oh, she's gone.
Yeah,
Carol, the land, he said, is straight up through here,
that's
but
right.
probably be somewhere that he lived.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
took a picture there already.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just think, perhaps our ancestors walked this lane to get to and from their home. Before leaving for Ireland, I had put a request on a Facebook group called Love Ireland, asking if there was anyone who knew of any individuals who we could hire to take us around Tavenahary, Daniel's farm, which was passed down to his son George and then to his grandson Daniel Murphy, and to Lubitavish to view that property where George had moved into with his niece Esther McCloy when he moved from the farm in 1898. This was before Elwyn volunteered. A John Rollins was suggested, but a Hugh MacDonald sent me a personal message advising me that he didn't think John could fulfill my needs. He went on to tell me that across the river from 40 Gults Road was a farm originally owned by a Whiteford who he believed was related to the Murphys. I checked my records, and Mary McClarty Murphy's daughter, Martha, had married a Whiteford. We exchanged a few messages back and forth discussing the situation. Today in Tavenbrack, while peering through the fence, a gentleman drove past us, then backed up, got out of his car, and said rather than be curious and wondering what we were doing, he would just stop and ask. We told him we were looking at the townland our ancestor immigrated from. He said he had been talking to someone looking for their family. Then he stopped and said, "Are you Judy?" It was Hugh MacDonald. To describe him would be to think of our brother Ernie's personality multiplied 10 times. He called a spade, very direct man. He was a staunch nationalist. We had quite a visit, heard many stories, and thought we might never get away. He told us where the McCloy's farm was, and to watch for a neighbor who didn't like people traipsing around his property. One of the McCloy's properties, now a self-catered cottage. Towards the end of the conversation, he asked if we had visited both cemeteries in Cushendall, and Elwyn mentioned that we had the key to the church. He said, "So you're Protestant?" I assured him that we had both Catholics and Protestants in our family. Daniel McClarty, George McClarty, and Daniel Murphy's home, 40 Gults Road. There was someone living in the residence here, and if it was the original farmhouse, it has been extensively renovated. The people living there were renters and knew no details of the property. There was an original old shed-type building there. The road down to the property was cemented and long and steep. I thought Elwyn was going to lose the bottom of his car when we pulled off it onto the roadway. Elwyn told us that a lot of the farms had cemented roads because they were put in when they were raising cows for milk, and so the milk companies provided the cemented roads for easier passage to the farms. Esther and John McCloy and George McClarty, 9 Lubitavish. There were 2 McCloy properties, one with a self-catered cottage, completely rebuilt except for the stone corners of the building. And number 9 with a derelict dwelling. George would have lived here until his death with a family of 5 children. This comment was from Barry's Facebook page. Many compliments to Judy and Carol. You were able to find, see, and film so many properties. So very exciting to see the very old buildings and ancestral lands. Then there was this comment below it. Lorna has been posting and using my name. My answer. I thought that was the case. Elwyn was a wonderful guide and researcher, and our thanks go to him for all his work. He even drove us to Ballymena to catch the train back to Belfast. We changed trains and headed to Dundalk to visit my stepdaughter, Tanya Blazick Doherty, and her husband Mick and their daughters. Tanya met us at the train station and drove us around town before heading to her home. Daniel's daughter Esther married Robert Shanky and settled in Dundalk. It is her line that kept in touch with Ethel Cliff Phillips' line, and there are many letters included in the book from her family members and George to the family in Iowa. They lived at 6 Mountain View. That area has been redeveloped, and the row house shown below now sits at that site. Apparently that area is now a bit unsavory, so we didn't stop. In March, I sent a message to a Jennifer Pender who showed as a DNA match to me as being related to Eliza, Esther and Robert's daughter, who married a William Moiter. She didn't respond to me until April 13th, advising she lives in Middleton, Cork, confirming that she was their descendant. I didn't notice her message until April the 18th, when we had already left Ireland. I responded, telling her all the places we'd seen in Ireland, and she responded with this: "Wow, you've packed a lot in. You've been to places in Ireland I'd never been myself. If you make it over to Ireland again, let me know and I'll do my best to meet up. Enjoy the rest of your trip. Safe travels." I doubt if I'll ever be back, but maybe some young relatives can check in with her if you ever go to Ireland. From her photo, she looks pretty young, so should be around for a while. Tanya and Mick Doherty, Ravensgate, Dundalk. It was so nice to see Tanya and her family, having last seen her a year before COVID hit. Mick's family has lived on the property for hundreds of years and have their own little community. His parents' home was across the street from their house. His sister lives in his grandfather's old house. There were cousins up the way. Mick is a carpenter and has built a lovely large 4-bedroom home, complete with a dedicated circular room used as their daughter's playroom. Leah and Alana are the cutest little Irish lassies. We took a walk down the lane and saw amazing stone fences, abandoned stone buildings, including a sweat lodge. I love how the Irish preserve their history. We went out to Fitzgerald's pub for dinner. Joe Biden's family came from the area called Carlingford, just down the roadway, and he had dinner in the pub while visiting as vice president. We had a lovely dinner and visit, a few cheers when we parted ways at the hotel. I forgot to get a photo of Tanya and her handsome Irish husband.